Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny squared.
Winter Sports on a Positive Tip podcast on a Sunday afternoon. Back in our regular slot here. Hopefully this will be exciting. We will be in person next week. Maybe we can do something in person. That'll be really cool. So we'll play that by ear. So Kenny, how you doing?
It's feeling like spring. I feel like it's nice for baseball to fully be like in season somewhat. So I don't know. I'm good with where sports is, even though we don't have college March Madness anymore.
Yeah. Well, listen, there's plenty of baseball on. There's the Mets are in a rain delay, so they may not play today. I don't think the Yankees are down in Tampa, so they'll play. Right? So
Yeah.
they'll play indoors, and it usually never rains down there anyway. But yeah, why don't we start? We got plenty of baseball to talk about, but why don't we start with the NBA? And we could start with the Knicks, and we could start with a couple other teams, and maybe we talk a little MVP stuff. So the Knicks have hit a little bit of a wall here. What are some of your thoughts on the Knicks over the last couple of weeks or so?
I know you had said this like maybe about a month or two ago, but I feel like the Knicks have to learn to win these close games.
Yeah.
Like I've been watching some of them off and on. And like a lot of times I see them losing by like less than 5 points. And like part of that is like a team like Philadelphia, a team like Brooklyn, a team like Milwaukee, they know how to win those close games. So like, especially when it comes to the regular season, they know like, okay, this is how you play down the stretch. There's a few times where like in some of the games that I've watched where they kind of throw away a possession at the end, whether it's like they're a little too hesitant, they get a little overexcited. I don't know exactly what it is, but like to me, it's still a good sign. My hope is still that they can like climb into that 6th seed, so you don't have to worry about whether or not they'll make the playoffs. But even if they don't make the playoffs, I think this is still a very successful season. And really, like the playoffs isn't too far away. I'm very curious in general to see how the like the play-in tournament thing is going to work out. I think it might kind of have that same excitement that March Madness has. It's even like baseball with the wild card game. I like that it's one. I'm open to it being a 3-game series, but I like the one game because like everything rides on every single pitch, every single at bat. So like I'm hoping the Knicks don't have to worry about that. They'll just get, I don't know, Milwaukee or well, maybe not Brooklyn, but like one of those teams. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And so, but if it's so it is a 1-game play-in, that play-in tournament. It's 1 game. In the NBA?
Sort of.
Okay. It's 1 game.
I think
it's 4 teams, right? And then it's okay.
If you're in the 9 or 10 seed, you have to win 2 games. If you're the 7 or 8 seed, I think if you lose 2 games, you're out. I don't know the full. I have to look at it again, but there's an advantage to be 7 or 8. That's what I do remember.
I do. I'll be nervous if that's where the Knicks land in there, but I think some of that is what's made the NCAA tournament so special. The 1 game and you're out, and it's hard to do in a long season like also the NBA and in baseball, but it makes it exciting. That's I think why we love the NCAA tournament so much. It's like on any given day anybody could beat anybody, which has happened, right? So that should be interesting. Here's how I'll compare the Knicks with my early days in trying to do my walk with Jesus. There were so many times for that first year where I couldn't really close the deal, where I would take so many steps backwards. I would go and I would hear a message and I'd be pumped up for a day or so, and then during the week I might watch a movie that I knew I shouldn't have been watching or something like that. And it wasn't for a while till I was able to really close the deal where messages stuck, or I picked up the Bible and I started to actually understand, what what the Bible was trying to tell me and stuff like that. So I compared that a little bit. That might not be a great comparison, but I compared that a little bit to the Knicks here because there was so many Sundays where I just couldn't close the deal, where I got it, but I totally didn't get it. The Knicks, man, it is so hard for them to close the deal. You know, that game against Minnesota, I mean, you got to win a game like that. The game against Boston where they led by, so much, they led by like 13. They had like a double-digit lead throughout most of the game. And then, the fourth quarter, and it's definitely a mental block they need to get through because Thibodeau does a great job with his bench, I think. I think that he, aside from Julius Randle, who just plays a lot, but I don't think it affects him, everybody else, he rotates in and out, and even Randle, he gives a couple of times during it. I think if Toppin played better, which he has been lately, that Randle would probably be playing a little bit more. So I think he does. I don't think it's a physical thing. I think it's more of a mental thing that they just can't get past. I think they've only won 2 out of like 11 or 12 games, or there maybe 2 and 11 or 2 and 10, something like that, in games decided by 3 points or less. Now, a good sign was they came back against Memphis the other night, and Memphis is a pretty good team, probably on the same level as the Knicks. Maybe they're a little bit ahead because they've got all young players. But they did come back and win that game the other night, and they sealed the deal in overtime. They tied it up. I mean, they were down by 6 with about a minute left, and they tied it up. Made some really, really good plays down the stretch there. So maybe they're turning a corner a little bit. Maybe that'll be the game they turn a corner. But there's going to be a lot of teams I think they play here down the stretch that are kind of on the same par as them, right? Like Toronto, they play tonight, and Toronto and the Knicks this year around the same level. That's hard to say because Toronto has been a good team for a lot of years, but they've taken definitely a step back this year. So let's put the Knicks to the side for a second. You brought up a really good point before we jumped on the podcast. NBA MVP. I got to say, I have no idea. I have some thoughts that might be a little bit out of the box. But what are you thinking? I mean, NBA MVP every year is a big deal. It's hard to win the MVP in the NBA. Even LeBron hasn't won it as many times as you would think he would have won it. I think Curry had a little bit of a run, and then you'll have a James Harden that steps up, wins it one year. But what are you thinking? I mean, Harden has played phenomenal, but now, like you said, he's missing some time here. So as Durant, who has played great when he's played, LeBron is missing some time here too. Anthony Davis is missing a lot of time. So who are some names that stick out for you?
Well, it is interesting you talk about the missing time. I'd have to look at the exact number here. But I think in the last 30 years, there's only been one MVP that's missed more than 10 games in a season. And that's Allen Iverson in 2001 when he missed 11 games. So the missing time is very interesting. I'll throw out a few names here because you could still probably make a case for LeBron, especially if the Lakers, who have struggled, if they go back to being a top 2 seed, you make a case for him. Somebody that I think is kind of flying under the radar, which is kind of interesting, is Giannis. He has about the same numbers as last year, and their record isn't as tremendous, but they are still a top 3 team in the East. I would also say Chris Paul, not necessarily because statistically he's one of the best, but you look at where Phoenix was last year, they were the Cinderella of the bubble because they won. I think they went undefeated. But then Chris Paul has made them a title contender. So really those are 2 that really stick out for me. I think Harden has a good shot, but also for me, Harden, he started the year in Houston and he started really bad in Houston. And then the whole thing of him not playing hard and then just saying, I want out, to me doesn't really strike a good chord with me, but it might for some other people, especially when he's played, the Nets are easily the best team in the league. So yes. I don't know. And it kills me to say that because that could have been the Knicks, but we'll let that go. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I love how he's transformed his game though. He's now the best passer in the league when he never knew what a pass was before. He's just, that shows you how talented he actually is. And so I want to go back to Giannis for a second and just talk about the Bucks, because I do think that I was telling someone this the other day. I think the Bucks are really flying under the radar, and I think that this will be a year where you may not see them get bumped quickly in the playoffs. Here's why: they're playing some tough games this year. If you remember the last couple of years, I never thought Giannis was ready for the playoffs because he was playing like 25 minutes a night because the Bucks were blowing everybody out, so they were sitting him a lot. The Bucks aren't blowing people out this year. People have kind of caught up to them a little bit. But I think that's a good thing as they get into, because there's going to be a point where they get into a battle-tested 6-7 game long, tough series. And I just think they weren't ready for that last year. Miami was more ready for that than the Bucks were last year. And that's why I think Miami relatively easily beat the Bucks last year. So I think that I don't think Giannis is going to be the MVP this year, though. That being said, I really think that the Bucks, though, the way he's playing and the way that he's playing now, 30 some odd minutes a night, that's going to push them forward a lot more. Chris Paul is an interesting choice. He's another guy that has just kind of found the fountain of youth. I mean, he seems to just get better with age. And for this team to be, I think last I looked, they were like 21 games over 500, number 2 in the West. Whereas they came on second half last year, obviously. But what he's done to that team is just unbelievable. And it's been quietly one of the best stories in the NBA. So I think that some of the guys that we probably thought at the beginning of the year, and I do have a name I'm going to throw back at you, but when you think about Luka Doncic in Dallas or Jamal Murray, in Denver, I think those were probably the guys that they thought would be some of the NBA, MVP favorites going into this year. But they've struggled, both those teams. I mean, they're playing extremely well now, both Dallas and Denver. But I think it's I don't think either one will be enough to be MVP. But the one we said, if I remember right, 3-4 weeks ago was Joel Embiid. And are we thinking because he's been hurt that maybe he's taking a step back as well?
I think that could be part of it. But also, I feel like he's missed less time than some of these other guys. Like LeBron, I know LeBron had an Instagram out a couple of days ago, like, a storm's coming, get ready. But it still seems like he's not fully ready. Who knows how long Harden's going to be out, and Durant has missed most of the season. But I think if you're giving it to somebody, like, regardless of who gets it, it's probably going to be something that's very atypical, like a guy that's missed a lot of time, a guy that's like really good but not on the best team. I could see Joel Embiid still winning it because, especially like when he got hurt, he was still considered for a lot of people like the top player in the game. So I guess we'll see. It'll be very interesting. I think it might be like, remember Jimmy Rollins in 2007, like a guy that got really hot at the end and carried his team. I could see that being the MVP this year.
Damian Lillard, I could see that happening too, because they're playing extremely well, and he's just an all-world player. We didn't mention Donovan Mitchell. They're still the top team in the West. And so he's just been phenomenal all year long. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. But one last quick thing for me with LeBron, with the amount of mileage on his legs and how he's gone into playoffs every year, except like 2 years ago, and deep in the playoffs every year, I think this time off for him actually is going to do him extremely well. So when he says a storm is coming, I believe it, because I think for him this time of year, and I don't know how many games it's been, it's probably been at least 10 that he's been out. But I think for him that's a good thing. So I'll tell you definitively right now, I would vote for Chris Paul. And I mean, he's never won it, and he's everywhere he's gone, he's won. He's never taken that next step, and he might not be able to take the next step this year with Phoenix, but you never know once they get in. But for that team to turn around just from a one player like that, he's got to be at least 36, 37 years old too. So I think that's just been outstanding. Let's turn to baseball. So what's going on with your Yankees, man?
Well, we're sports on the positive tip, so I'm going to say positive here.
There you go.
I think it's a very good thing that I was really concerned about Aaron Judge. He DH one day, the next day was pulled early, and then was out of the lineup. So it's like, what's going on? And then Aaron Boone at first is like, oh, he's fine. We're just giving him rest. And then he's like, yeah, he's dealing with some like side soreness. So and like, this is kind of a lot of times, this is what's happened with the Yankees. It's like, oh, he's just a little banged up. He'll be fine. And then a couple days later, you find out he's out for 2 months. So it's good to see Aaron Judge playing. He was in the lineup again today. But really for me, the biggest takeaway I've had early on has been how good the bullpen has been, specifically Jonathan Loaisiga. He's been kind of a guy that hasn't really found a good niche in the bullpen. At first, they were trying to put him as a starter. They tried him as an opener. He's kind of come in some higher leverage situations. He's been a guy that is in like later in the game than Darren O'Day. He came in after Justin Wilson as well. So like, it shows that Boone has a lot of faith in him, and he's really paid off. He's got great stuff. He's really looked pretty solid. So I think that's a big thing. It looks like Stanton is starting to turn the corner a little bit. But really, like, aside from yesterday, like the last couple days, pitching's been kind of but like for the most part, the starting pitching too it's looked great. Garrett Cole had an outing, I think it was 7 innings, 13 strikeouts, and no walks. Something that only like 6 other Yankee pitchers have done. Last one was Tanaka back in, I think, 2014. Kluber's looked kind of touch and go. Tyone looked really good in his first start. Montgomery is pitching today, and so far I think he's only given up 2 runs. So Yankees are looking pretty good. The hitting still isn't fully there, but I'm also not that worried about it. It's still April, and a lot of these guys, like, give Aaron Hicks some time. He'll get it together. DJ LeMahieu has looked pretty good the last couple of days after he said himself, like, I don't feel like I'm fully there. Gio Urshela has kind of struggled. He actually was on the COVID list for a day for like vaccine side effects. He hit a 2-run home run today. Brett Gardner is another fountain of youth guy. He's been in the lineup pretty much every day. Another big takeaway for me, Mike Tuchman. He was like, at first he wasn't sure if they weren't sure if he was going to be on the roster. Right. He's come in a couple times in huge like pinch run situations and really has made the difference. Back on Wednesday, in extra innings, or no, not in extra innings, in the 9th inning, he comes into pinch run for Gary Sanchez and scores from first on a double. There's no way Sanchez would have scored on that double. So It tied the game. Yankees lost because of the extra inning rules. We won't talk about that, but yeah, it's so annoying. But like, so far so good. Hopefully they could pull out a win. They'd be 4-5. Not horrible, but I'll take it.
Yeah. And it's another, I mean, the Yankees always have these pickups. Odor, when I read that, I'm like, this guy who was, and I guess Texas is thinking they've gotten the most out of him, but he's probably still got several good years left, I would think. And so why did the Yankees pick him up?
Truth be told, I don't know. I guess they probably like him a little better than Tyler Wade, who's kind of been their backup. Tyler Wade was kind of the speedster defense guy, but it seems like they're kind of shifting away from him. He was actually he got optioned to the alternate site, so right now he'll start the year in the minors. He's also struggled offensively throughout his entire career. I don't know this offhand, but I would guess that his career batting average is under 200. So I think they're hoping they can get some more pop out of Odor. I mean, everyone knows his greatest hit wasn't an actual hit, but punching Jose Batista.
Oh, poor Jose Batista. Yeah, wow. So, but the Yankees traditionally have always, that's why I told you that they weren't going to cut Jay Bruce. They like that veteran, that, knows his place. Now Odura, I think, is used to being a starter, so it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to coming off the bench, because that I can't see that wouldn't be his role, because you're not gonna.
Yeah.
I would not take Torres, definitely not LeMahieu, but Torres or Shella, I wouldn't take any of them out of lineup. Those guys are gonna play mostly every day. But of course, in the American League, you have the DH, so you can kind of rotate him in, so at least he gets some at bats. That was an interesting pickup.
Yeah. They won't rotate him in, though. Stanton has DH on lock. They said he's not going to play in the field.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. So, I would play Stanton in the field. I wonder why. They're just afraid that he's going to get hurt. So, yeah. Well, and two other quick things. Three other quick things. I'll go quick on the Mets. I mean, it's been a disappointing start. I hate that the Boo Birds are out already. And Conforto and Alonso really got booed a lot, especially yesterday. But if you are looking for just someone you can talk about, with Isaac and with your grandkids 20, 30 years from now, you can tell them that you saw Jacob Degrom. I mean, it is just unbelievable how good he's getting every year. He so easily throws 100 and 101 miles an hour. And, I'm not even going to talk about how the Mets never get him any runs. And like I said, I told you this, it wasn't that unusual when I was younger, because the rotations would always line up so that Tom Seaver, the Mets were playing the Cardinals. You knew Tom Seaver was going against Bob Gibson. The Mets were playing the Phillies. You knew Tom Seaver was going against Steve Carlton, right? It just always lined up that way for whatever reason. And so it wasn't that unusual. If you probably look up stats and see, did Tom Seaver get a lot of run support? He probably didn't, because he was pitching against, the top pitcher on the other team. It doesn't really happen that way anymore, though Trevor Rogers was great yesterday. I got to give props. And I'm really, really impressed with the Marlins pitching. I think I said that a few weeks ago. And two of them are hurt right now. But when they get their pitching back, they're going to be a dangerous team this year. I really feel that way. But I think that Degrom is just he's going to be this generational pitcher. I mean, he's 32 and he's getting better. So fingers crossed that it's all natural. I'm pretty sure it is with Degrom. Because Roger Clemens, he started getting better also at like 32, 33. So, but here's another couple of quick things. We can save Domingo Germán for a second, because we'll maybe combine him with Desean Watson. So let's move quick here. We've got a no-hitter pitched by the Padres, and you were the one who kind of texted me. I think I fell asleep because it was out on. It wasn't on the West Coast, right? They were playing Texas, but it was somehow late. And so Padres' first no-hitter ever in their history. And I feel bad. They called it the curse of Clay Kirby. And so I'll be really quick, and I just want to get your reaction to it, because I sent you all the stuff, and you've heard me talk about this before. And I feel bad because Clay Kirby, I didn't realize as I looked this back up, he passed away at a very young age, only 43. He had a heart attack after he had a procedure. And so, because I was like, man, I never really heard him talk about that night. Maybe he did back then, and then I realized, that's why he hasn't talked about it, because unfortunately he's been dead for quite some years. But anyway, so the Padres are playing the Mets. So I'm in my bed, and they're playing. Back then games would start at 8:00. So the game started at 11:00. But it was in the summer. But your grandmother, my mom, didn't. She was like, no, you can't stay up and watch that. But I had my little transistor radio with my thing in my ear, and I listened to that game, and I distinctively remember listening to that game. And a no-hitter, even now, and a no-hitter even then, was a big deal. He's pitching a no-hitter because he gives up a run in the first inning on a walk, a stolen base, a pop-up to the infield. Tommy Agee moves over to third, and he scores on a ground ball to the infield. So it's 1-0. Stays that way until the 8th inning, bottom of the 8th. Now the Padres stunk. They were probably 20, maybe 30 games out of first place. There was no pennant race. The Mets were in the pennant race that year, but and I could not believe it even at 11 years old. And I knew baseball even then. like, why is Preston Gomez, who turned out to be like a baseball lifer, he was a manager for a lot of teams, why is he taking him out? And a name we know came up to pinch hit for him, Cito Gaston, which was kind of odd that he wasn't playing that night, but because he was their slugger, him and Nate Colbert. I remember Padres only had two really good players, and I'm like, why they? Can you imagine when Clay Kirby, when he says, "Hey, come on back, we're pinch hitting for you"? I imagine how he felt, and so he pinch hits for him with a no hitter in the eighth inning to a team that's going nowhere. And then the Mets wound up getting a couple of runs off the reliever in the ninth inning. They wound up winning 3-0. And it's just an unbelievably horrible story for this guy. It was almost like his last name was Galarraga. I'm forgetting his first name. The guy for the Tigers, maybe about 7 years
Armando.
Armando Galarraga. And he got robbed of the no-hitter, and it was a bad call. The umpire, who retired now, I could see him with a handlebar mustache. And he totally admitted that he blew it. They shook hands the next day. So it was a little bit like that, but not. I mean, I would have loved that and heard the backstory. Like, why did Preston Gomez do this? What was he thinking? Now, you imagine if that was 2021, he would have been slaughtered in the media. This was 1971, so it was a little different, back then. But just a horrible, horrible story that he didn't get his no-hitter back then. And so here it is, 2021, 1969, they've been in existence, and that's the first actual no-hitter that the Padres pitched. Joe Musgrove, who grew up in San Diego, so that's a pretty nice story, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The Galarraga thing, that was a perfect game too. That was like he got the 27th out, but it was there.
I feel so horrible for him. Yeah.
Me too. I remember us watching that one. We're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think because we turned to it came on ESPN, I think, and we turned to it and we saw like the last inning, and even with the naked eye, we were like, oh man, it looked like he was safe, So or it looked like he was out, right? Yeah, that was a really terrible call. But what's your reaction to Clay Kirby? You've heard that story from me once or twice, but now you read it. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I do think it is rough because you had mentioned the comparison between 1971 and 2021. I'll give one from last year. Our good friend, former Ray, Blake Snell, got pulled from a game early, Game 7 of the World Series, and people were slamming Kevin Cash for doing that. So yeah, like people would be merciless if that was the case. I don't understand it either because, like, I understand if you're in a pennant race, if it's like last game of the season, but like, what do you got to lose? Let the guy throw out. Let the guy at least, even if he gives up a run, just let him go for it. Like at that point, you got nothing to lose.
Yeah. Now, if he had lost, if he had pitched that ninth inning and he had lost because he pitched all the way through the eighth inning. And if he had lost, would that have still counted as a no-hitter? Because I think one of the Yankees did that. Andy Hawkins, I think, pitched a no-hitter and lost, but I don't know if it's in the record book.
Yeah, I believe it might have an asterisk, but yeah, it would still be considered a no-hitter. But I think it would just be because technically now people can, like, let's say it's scoreless until the 10th inning, and then pitcher gives up a ground ball to the right side and a sac fly, like. That's still a no-hitter, but you can lose it 1-0. So part of the reason why I don't like the rule.
I think the name is Joe Nuxall. I think he pitched a 10-inning no-hitter and gave up a home run in the 11th for the Pirates. He was a pitcher for the Pirates, and I don't think he's in the record books, but because he lost the game. But he pitched like 10 no-hit innings. I mean, that'll never happen today. I mean, they barely want to pull him out, after. It's a horrible story. And I feel bad we haven't heard, from Clay Kirby. And I'd have to dig in a little bit more and see what he maybe said. And like, there's no record of a post-game press conference or anything like that. I don't know if they did them back then, So, but let's shift. Let's talk about, and we'll wrap up quickly with two not so pleasant stories, but we'll try to keep them positive. Although Domingo Germán is might turn into a pleasant story. So why don't you take it away with him?
Yeah, so Domingo Germán, 2019 won 18 games for the Yankees. Was arguably
came out of nowhere.
Yeah, like you could argue that he was the best pitcher that year. And then right around September of 2019, he's put on the administrative leave list. Apparently he had physically assaulted his girlfriend right in front of an MLB official, which is dumb for a billion reasons. So then he's just away from the team the rest of the year. During the offseason, they then make a decision on him to suspend him for half the season, or 81 games technically. He had served some of it before, so like he was scheduled to miss a huge chunk of time in 2020. When they shortened the season, it became the entire season. So suspended for the whole year. There's obviously a lot of like questions on whether or not he should stay on the roster. By all accounts, he went through like all the things that they had asked him to do. He also had a couple of really odd tweets and Instagram posts that kind of said like, I'm done with baseball, goodbye everyone, like kind of weird stuff like that. And then like Aaron Boone is like, I don't know what's going on in his head. So like very, very bizarre. Comes to spring training, and there's still some players that don't even like him on the team. Zach Britton was very open of saying like, you know, there's some people that like, you can't choose who your teammates are. So like, you could tell that like some of the players didn't really like him there. And he apparently talked to them like face to face, kind of saying like, this is what I did. I'm sorry I did it. I'm here to move on. And the Yankees were right there with him. It also doesn't help that, or it also helps his case that he was very good in spring training. I believe he gave up like 1 or 2 runs over several outings. So like, here he is, makes the opening day roster, is actually the number 3 pitcher. He's since been optioned because of, well, he wasn't really that good in either of his outings. So the Yankees are probably going to go with a guy like Michael King or maybe David Garcia. Not the point of the story. Right before his first start, he has a post that says, you know, God is giving me a second chance. He was willing to give Moses a second chance. I feel very grateful to be on this team. And I think it shows the humbleness of his heart. It really shows that humility that like, yeah, I really messed this up. And I think it kind of goes to show you that, yes, you can get a second chance. Not everyone does get that opportunity, but it looks like he's making the most of it. Hopefully he will be back. I would assume he'll probably be back at some point with the major league team, especially with guys that are kind of injury risk, so to speak. So I don't think we've seen the last of him at the major league level. I do hope he keeps his head on straight. And I believe he did end up marrying this girl. So hopefully everything is going in the right path. And I think it's great that he's giving glory to God. I don't know what his, like where he is exactly on his walk, or like if this was just like one of those like generic thank you God type of things. But I thought it was a really cool story. And I really hope that like, I hope we hear more from him. I hope he pitches in big games later on this year.
Yeah, you summed it up great. I don't really have anything to add to it. I think that hopefully he has turned to God and listen. We know that God is a God of second chances for sure, but even more than second chances, but at least a second chance, right? And it sounds like that's all he's asking for. And you know, hopefully he's made things right with the lady if they've gotten married, and hopefully it was a one-time mistake that will never happen again. Because it's just it's horrible to ever hear that. So yeah, I'm glad he publicly gave glory. I'm glad that his teammates have you know kind of forgiven him and welcomed him back, because it sounded like that was going to be very difficult for them to do. So, but it sounds like they did. You know, I think we'll go a little bit deeper next week because we're at the 34-minute or so mark. But I do want to get into, and you and I have, you know, purposely, we're not talking about controversial stuff, and we want to keep everything positive. But I think that we can't ignore what I think is going to be the biggest story in the NFL over these next several weeks, and this whole story that's starting with Desean Watson. And I've told you guys all the time that we don't know people. We don't know who celebrities are or anything like that. And sometimes you just can go by what you see, and everything that we've seen for these last, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 years that Sean Watson has been in the league, or when he was at Clemson, it's just been nothing but positive. And so it's the story of this. I think there's 20 some odd ladies now that are accusing him of assault and unwanted, sexual advances. And at first he was denying everything, but came out the last couple of days that he's now admitting to some consensual things with some of these ladies, and it's just unfolding in to me a really surprising way, and very, very disappointing way. And so I don't know what to make of it. So I think that maybe we'll give this one more week and see, because I have a feeling there'll be a lot more updates on this story this week. But there's so many other intertwined factors that probably aren't nearly as important, like where does he play next year? That probably is not, nearly as important as, obviously, now people are thinking, did he purposely say he wanted out of Houston because he knew what was coming? But how can you run from it anyway? It doesn't matter whether you play for Houston or the Jets. It's not going to go away. So I don't think that was it. But it's just, I think there's some underlying stuff there that as Christians, we definitely need to really step up and look at and talk about. I think that I've said this a few times, that you can't beat racism with just people of color, right? You need everybody to combat racism. And you certainly can't beat, sexism and people that will just think they can do a sexual assault and get away with it without men, without guys stepping up and saying something. And I think that in the Christian community, sometimes, we don't talk about some of this stuff. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant, because we've had a positive podcast, right? Is what we've tried to create. But I think we can talk about the story in a very positive light, in a very thoughtful manner, as well. But I think that in the Christian community, we sometimes just overlook stuff too, and maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah.
So we'll get into, I think, Desean Watson a little bit more next week. What are some of your, in a minute or so, what are some of your initial thoughts as you've seen this story unfold over the last few weeks?
I'll give two quick thoughts here. First, I think a lot of times people aren't always as they seem. Because, like you said, Desean Watson is probably the last person that I would think would have over 20 accusations of sexual assault by 20 different women. Like, not the guy I would think. Maybe, like, I don't know. I guess I'll stay away from dropping other names here. But, like, I think sometimes we don't always know who people actually are. And I think that's important to recognize. It's like, just because you may think someone's a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean they are that way. Number two, and I'll probably unpack this a little bit more, it also kind of goes to show me that God's perfect plan for sex is within the context of marriage. And it can be very destructive when it's outside of that bubble. And like, I'll go a little bit more in depth with that. But really, like, I think it goes to show, like, it can be very destructive, and like, it can cause a lot of issues. Like this isn't even just a, can I play football again? Is Desean Watson going to jail? Like, is he could lose a lot of money here. So,
Yeah.
God's perfect plan is always the best.
Okay. Well said. We'll start off with this story next week. So, it is, some things aren't easy to talk about, but I think that it's best to bring them into the open. All right, Kenny, take us home, man.
All right. Enjoy another nice Sunday of baseball. But for now, this is Kenny Squared End.
Kenny.
With sports on the positive tip. We'll see you in person. Well, maybe not in person for you, but in person for us next week.
Absolutely. Take care, folks.